Yes, it was Sabi. But if you remember correctly, I only joined you in Standard 9 because I was part of the other people and I made the mistake of asking Whiteford, could I please stay back a year because my parents got divorced and I heard that everybody had problems when their parents got divorced. So that's when I joined you. So I was only in Standard 9 and matric with you guys. Fortunately, the classrooms and the sports field mingled well. And that's
back,
with all due respect, very difficult to remember. I know that Mrs. Paper was my teacher. In Standard 1, it was Miss Barnett. Standard 2, I think it was Miss Hill. Number 3, it was James Warner. 4, it was Fanny Kirk. And 5, I think it was Euston. So yes, I can remember a little bit about it. And I know McEwen enjoyed caning me. It was a great pleasure because he took me for geography. So that was my junior school experience. No one really stood out for me. I think that the teacher that taught the equivalent class next door, Laidlaw, he's someone who stood out as a gentleman, but nobody else really stood out. I know the woodwork teacher was a bit of a masochist, but that was about it. I'm sure you're hearing that story from other people as well. But otherwise, the junior school came, it went. Even senior school came and went. There's not a lot of, my life revolved around the sports field, not the classroom. I was never an academic. So, it was always, I enjoyed playing rugby. I enjoyed playing cricket, always did. The rugby field, and I remember under 16, I worked my way up from the E team somewhere in the beginning to the B team. And then there was a gentleman that had a vicious tackle. And eventually, I'm told that he crash tackled me at a practice in under 16B. And I went up in the air and landed down on the ground. And that was the end of my rugby career. So he took my knee out. And that's when I joined you on the hockey field. So, first year hockey was third team. The second year hockey was second team, and then first team. And that's where you, me, Johnny Sandler, I think, was the left back. Can't remember who the right back was, but it was a magic group of people. Both years. Both years were really. Johnny Sleep was he the right back. So, but that team that I first joined, it was an absolutely wonderful team with Dermot Campbell and those guys as well. And I remember Castle on the left wing was someone who I could never keep up with in the inter-house games. It was something phenomenal. But yeah, so those are the memories that I have. Classroom was never my favorite place, but we got through and got to university and managed to get in to do a BCom. I remember writing the matric exam and then going up to Forries for a drink and actually feeling totally lost because all of a sudden everything around me that I'd built my life around disappeared. And that's one feeling that I will never forget. And I'm not quite sure how other people feel once they've finished writing the trick, but I know I was absolute loss because what I'd done was I was called up to the army for June. I was not going to go to university. I had applied for a BCom, but then basically withdrew my application and then decided, no, it's better to go to university. So they still had my application, so they accepted me. So 4 years later, I ended up with a BCom. And then, unfortunately, we had to go to the army, which wasn't fun at all. Fortunately, I had Martin Slacks sleeping next to me because he came to the army with me. Peter Powis was there as well. And
where were you?
I spent 2 years there. I was in Voortrekkerhoogte. Then I did an officer's course in Heidelberg. Then I sat with internal audit, counting vehicles, and you can't believe how many vehicles were not recorded. Then I ended up in the pay office. Then I ended up in the castle for the last 6 to 8 months. And you lived like an absolute king. You cannot believe the 5-course meals on a Sunday, and it was just unbelievable. The weight I put on, I had to go jogging every afternoon just to survive. So, but that's the army. And then 1980, I came back and went back to university to get a CTA to be able to write the CA exam. But that took 3 years. I think that was about par for the course from all of us that got a BCom, went to the army, and then and then studied. Yeah, so I eventually qualified. It's the feeling that you get when you actually qualify and see your name there, and you don't think you've made it, because the final exam, the final paper which you had to write was audit, and I was with a small company, and we'd never seen what the big companies had done. And the questions they'd asked were practical questions the big guys had. So you actually had to go back to basics and think. And I didn't think I'd got through, but for some miracle, I made it. Oh, so that's what happened. And then that was, I think, 1983. Yeah, beginning of January 1984, I fell off a motorbike, unfortunately, and severed my artery on my right arm, close to the shoulder. Unfortunately, people put me in the back of their car and took me up to Krugersdorp Hospital. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. Also severed my ulnar and radial nerve in the right arm. And what that led was there was no movement in my right hand at all. And I had no feeling in my right arm. And the nerves grew back 1 meter a day. So I said that was January 1984. I was still working. I was actually booked off work for 4 months. I went back after 4 weeks trying to write with my left hand, looking like a spider. This physiotherapist got hold of me. So I've never written with my right hand again. I'm now left-handed, and I've never been back onto a squash court, nor have I ever played cricket again. So going up, and officially I was going to Johannesburg just for 2 years, just to get some experience, and then coming back to Cape Town. Well, 35, 36, 37 years later, it's time to go back home at last. And in fact, we were very surprised when my wife a few years ago suggested that we go back to Cape Town. And that's when I started looking and basically put my name down for an off-plan house, which was given to, I took ownership in July last year. So that's where we're at. I mean, career-wise, yes, I've had an interesting career. I've worked with some big companies. Barlow's was one of them, a subsidiary of Barlow's. Rembrandt, I worked in the marketing company. So being a non-smoker, the only condition I had was I had to have an ashtray on my desk, and they were allowed to smoke in my office. I moved inside the group through 3 companies, but always ran into political headwinds. Basically, I became a Mr. Fix-It. You go in, you fix the thing up, and then you're either a political threat or you're bored and you need to move on. So as I said, I moved through 3 companies in Rembrandt. Then I joined a UK company where I spent 3 years. I was actually quite shocked at our knowledge versus their knowledge on accountancy. But anyway, we got there, and politics, everything, everywhere. Setting accounting standards, the quality of the accounts produced. I went in the ages of the mini computer, which they had, and I threw it out and put in a PC-based thing, but it was DOS-based, so it's a long time ago. Wow. Had a payroll, I walked in with a payroll where they outsourced it. I couldn't understand this. So I went to a show, chose an payroll package, which I put in 5 different companies afterwards. It was a company that accounts were a disaster. The audit report had over 20 pages to it. The following year, I think it had 2 reports, and the year after that, nothing. So, that's where I come from. I basically obviously run into some strange companies, like a company owned by an anthroposophical guy who produced vitamins but refused to go into generics. So he was busy destroying his company, and all sorts of funnies went on there. We'll just leave that. Eventually, I joined in 2000. I joined a company which was outsourced from Telkom. And at that stage, I think they outsourced 4 or 5 companies at that stage. We were the only one that survived. I lasted there 10 years. I got on the wrong side of the chairman after about 9 years, so it took him a year to get rid of me. And so I left. And guess who I ended up working for? This was June 2010. And in September 2010, guess who I ended up working for? The Guptas. I set up their newspaper, the finance department for their newspaper. And that took 6 months. But after 6 months, I had had enough. But I was forced to sit in an office and not go for interviews in month number 7. Then I was unemployed for 2 years because the Greek tragedy was taking place. The economies around the world were taking strain. I had a brother in Dubai who looked after me for 6 months. I was there for 1 month. After I left, I was actually interviewed on the day before I left. They wanted me to stay, but I had to get out the country. I came back a month later for 3 months. Nobody would talk to me. But again, when I left, people wanted to talk to me. So I went back for another 2 months. And again, I sat staring, looking at the desert, and then came back. And by that stage, so I understand where you are after COVID, because I was in the same position after those 6 months, because I had a son at university in the UK as well. So, yes, I understand the financial drain that does take place to people. I then started lecturing for BCom students for Damlin, and then someone decided
Just
that,
a second.
all right, no problem. I worked for a lady by the name of Ronica Ragavan. If you watch the press, she's part of the Estina, being accused of something in the Estina dairy case. She was my direct boss. I worked very closely with Atul Gupta. His comment to me was, well, you're going to help me fuck up other people or other companies. And that was his favorite expression. I met AJ Gupta, because after being there for a while, I was introduced to him. So I met the whole clan. I found out what Diwali was all about, because I attended the Diwali while I was there. Jacob Zuma present, was Jacob Zuma's son present, and anybody who was anybody in Johannesburg was present, including the Vice Chancellor from Wits University. Yes, it was an interesting time, but there's only so much in Ronica. I think I became a threat to Ronica Ragavan, because she's got no qualification and works incredibly hard. I must give her some credit for that. But actually doesn't understand that, you get junior people to do junior work. Senior people don't do junior work as well. So yes, it was an interesting time, but there were jobs available. There was interviews available in month number 7. But being forced and not being allowed to go to interviews, and they were actually waiting for me to go to an interview so they could fire me. But anyway, that's the way it went. And I had to sit in an office. Yeah. I wasn't allowed to do anything, but I wasn't allowed to go for interviews either. I had one telephonic interview, which was not successful. But anyway, that's an experience. Yeah. I was unemployed for 2 years. And then what I narrated on going, my brother John supported me in Dubai. Yeah. I couldn't even get a contract job. Sorry, there is one little tale I'd like. It was a relationship because of the economy. It was a relationship because of the Greek tragedy taking place. There was also, because I had the New Age newspaper in my CV, people would not interview me. Yes, it was. And I was told that by an employment agent. So yes, that was part of it. It was less than helpful. Okay. It was, we see the Gupta, we see the New Age newspaper. No, he must be corrupt. We're not interested in talking to him. Yeah, that's... But what also happened in that period of time, one agent did put me through for a temporary, a 5-month job at SAA, and I was interviewed by a senior person, plus the person whose job was, she was going on maternity leave. But I didn't get the job simply because she was scared that I would actually show her up. So that's the state enterprise story for you. Yep. I've also, in my contracts, I worked for a black construction company, and the jobs, the construction, the houses they were building were in the Free State. And whenever the owner of the company went to the Free State, I believe he had tea with Ace Magashula. Yes, I've seen a little bit of South Africa. Yeah. So, but what happened was, yes, as I said, once it took 2 years for someone to give me a chance, and then I actually got back into the routine of contracting. Yeah. Then, after 5 years, in December 2015, I got a phone call from the company where I'd been the financial director for 10 years, and the CEO got rid of me. They're saying, no, we're in trouble. Will you come and help us? So I said, well, my contract's coming to an end. He had the courage to have a cup of coffee with me, and we kissed and made up, and I went back and worked for him. And basically, I worked for him until yesterday when I retired. I thought I was only going back for a couple of months, but the company was so far gone. Firstly, we tried to put it together, but it had two fundamental flaws. One, its rental was too high, and number two, its payroll was too high. So in August, it was placed in liquidation. We then worked with the liquidators until February. This is 2016. We then worked with the liquidators until February 2017. We then started, the chairman or CEO bought the profitable part of the company, and we started again. We rebuilt it from scratch, and it's now an incredibly successful group of companies, doing very, very, very well. He looked after me, and I'm actually glad that he had the courage to ask me to go back, and I'm glad I was big enough to go back. And in fact, we actually had lunch on Tuesday, where there were only 4 of us left that had started up in 2000. There was a colleague of mine that was on the board, and there was a senior engineer and the CEO, chairman. We had, and we parted on extremely good terms. My staff didn't want to, and the privilege I've had is to build up a department that I'm exceptionally proud of. To have people like that to work with me is it's something I never even dreamed of, and it actually took my whole career and all the pain that's gone with it to actually put a team like that together. Because it's not, remember, it comes from not being a wealthy company. It comes from a situation where you're not paying people the best salaries that are out in the marketplace. But this group of people were very, very special. Yes, there were a couple of bad eggs there that I had to say thank you very much, cheers to. There were actually 2 of them. But everyone, I think my strength was being able to identify their strengths and weaknesses and counseling them to their strengths, and understanding the weaknesses and filling in the weaknesses with them, because I've always been prepared to stand side by side with my staff. And in fact, what had happened was they didn't want to put things on a card because there were too many personal things they wanted to say to me. So what they did was put little scrolls of paper inside the balloon and blew it up and then gave it to me. So there are 14 or 15 messages where I must admit I was close to tears with some of them. And they are close to tears saying goodbye to me. It is very sad. But, there comes a time when you have to make a decision. And I'm going to miss them, and I do miss them. And I do miss not being there, and I do miss what we've created, because it's very special. 2 of them basically referred to me as a father figure. Most of them referred to my strong leadership style. And we've got quite a tough boss, and basically appreciating me shielding them from the aggressiveness of my boss. So yeah, and in fact, when I said goodbye to one of them yesterday on Teams, they were actually in tears, which is very sad, because I've gone out of my way to build a department. I told my boss, this is something happened to me. I created staff that he puts a good CFO in place, and my staff will train them. And it's as I said, it's like they'd all written these notes, and I actually phoned each one on Teams and said goodbye to them. I said one of them was in tears, which is sad. But you tell them to say, guys, you've got to go forward. All the best. You've been trained. You're good at what you're doing. And that's my story. The sorrow is missing my staff, but I'm going further. And I've got something to look forward to. There's my family in Cape Town. They're the old SACS friends. Just remember, I go to 2 matric farewells. I went to the 1972s in September, and I'm going to see you guys. And there's special people from both classes. And I basically am going to go out of my way to go and see people. There's one person at the 30-year matric, 72 matric union. He's up here in Johannesburg, where we said we were going to get together for a drink. Well, 20 years later, we went to another matric reunion and hadn't had that drink. He gets back to South Africa the next day or 2. I'll be having a drink with him on the 7th, just to make sure there's a commitment that we made, and we're going out of our way to meet each other. And I'm really looking forward to the class of 73, because there's very special people there as well. Andrew Thompson, unfortunately, is not there, but I understand why. Okay. So yeah, but there's not I'm busy. I'm going somewhere. It's not a case of, I mean, my auditor sat in my office yesterday. He said, well, he knows a number of people that have just gone into retirement, and they sort of say, well, what are we going to do now when we wake up? I'm afraid I just don't have enough to do. I will be far too busy. There's far too much I want to do. I've already been approached up here to do due diligence in Cape Town. Whether it comes to fruition or not, I don't know. But I have skills that I believe can benefit companies. I will never again take a permanent job, but I'm quite happy to go and do contracting for people. And my strength is to be able to train people. Accountancy is so badly understood in this country. If you haven't been in this industry, you can't do the job. Whereas I've had so many industries that I've gone through. I can go in, I can identify what is wrong. I have developed systems and procedures that work. That is why the company in 2000 was the only company from Telkom survived. Was basically saying, okay, this is your history, but where are you going to? And that's critically important, is the forecasting, especially the cash. Never mind the standard stuff. Yeah, so, and those are the things that I can offer companies should they be interested. I mean, I've gone into one company, where this was just the biggest pain in the backside, just looking where his cash was going, where he was going to get cash from. He never ever paid his creditors on time, but, the 7 o'clock meetings telling us where we're going to cash flow was not something that he looked forward to and avoided. But anyway, as I said, every time I open my mouth, some fool speaks. I can never forget that, nor could you. As we grow up, we actually see teachers in a different light. And, John Badenhorst was one of the teachers that I respected. The other teachers, I mean, Louis Knutzer, thank God he rescued my Afrikaans, because I had Dick Smith for 3 years, and he was a disaster. And I hated doing Afrikaans homework, as my colleagues will remember. And I mean, we had Chalky Dysel for science. I also, I respected him as well, but I actually can't remember all the teachers that I had. And, the one thing that I do remember is that I will never forget, is being at SACS and the ethics that SACS has taught me. The people that we mixed with. I remember in the 72 speech, Edwin Ehrlich gave the speech, and he commented on SACS had people from the very poor to the very rich. And that, I think, is probably the most important thing that I was taught to mix with. I can mix with anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. And I respect people, no matter where they are or who they are. So, yeah, I've got a lot to thank SACS for, and I think that is probably the greatest thing that I thank those guys for. But it also drove me on to get to where I am and to do what I've done. So, I mean, there's been some very, very interesting characters that I've worked for, worked with. There's political situations that I've never handled correctly. And, and if you go back, look at all the people that I mixed with and that I knew, I think I must respect just about everybody around me, including the teachers. I mean, I might not remember the teachers' names. Might not remember all the students' names. I mean, we'll arrive there and people won't recognize me and I won't recognize you. And that's going to happen. We know that. But we're going to have a great time anyway. If I can just change the subject, I'd like to just talk about Mark, if you don't mind. Mark was probably one of the most brilliant people I knew, the naughtiest shit I knew. I know that he unfortunately was forced to do Latin because he was bright and I was dumb, and I did accountancy. And I know he walked into his matric paper and in the prelims, he put his name on the paper and went to sleep. In matric, he ended up with 19%. I think it's even a miracle that he got 19%, but he still got a university pass. That's how bright this guy was. He went to the Navy for 4 years. He then basically got involved in electrical engineering. He then moved up to Pretoria. And the saddest thing was that I paid for him, his wife, and his family, his son and daughter, to come down to Cape Town in December 1984. And we know on the 1st of February 1985, He was in a head-on collision 20 k's outside Landsberg, where the guy coming down fell asleep at the wheel. And that was the saddest moment in my life. And it was the last time I've ever cried. So, you know, I think I just have to mention that if you don't mind it. Look, that was devastating for my entire family. And, you know, still, you can hear the emotion when we talk about it. Mm. Okay. I actually, look, we got involved in HMS Pinafore together. And I joined the Gilbert and Sullivan Society after I qualified as an accountant. And when I moved up to Johannesburg, there was a friend of mine that was into amateur theatre and ran his own little thing. So we did Fiddler on the Roof. We did one or two other things as well. I'm sorry, before that, I actually got involved in Fiddler on the Roof just in Pretoria, just seeing an advert and going and getting involved in that. Mm. And then a person that was in the show with me had a slideshow, and my future wife was present. And we hit it off and eventually got married. We've got, that's how I met her. And believe it or not, she's an ex-Cape Townian that was born here, but her father set up banks all around the countryside. So she never spent more than a year or two at any school. Yeah, we've had 2 children, a girl and a boy. My daughter's a qualified civil engineer, still in Johannesburg, and she's got 2 children. So I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter and a 3-month-old grandson. My son, he's in IT. He was a naughty little shit, took after my brother. His claim to fame at 12 years old was he was ranked as one of the top hackers in the world on a website. Today's day number 1, still got up at 5 o'clock, still mowed the lawn, still I'm busy working, packing up. There's no such thing as any peace. But yeah, just talking about the future, I've got timeshare, but my daughter and my wife have used most of it. And I've hardly ever gone on holiday with them, other than over Easter this past year. What I have installed is my wife and I will be going up the West Coast for a week in April. And my son is paying for my wife and I to go on a boat trip to Norway from the 29th of May until the 6th of June. So yes, that's what retirement has in store for me. There's a house with my neighbor has sent me a photograph of the weeds that have grown in the garden, because you get a house and you get open plot. So yes, there's a lot to do there. Yeah. So yeah, the future is, I haven't got time to get bored yet, I'm afraid to say. Yeah, I think that, you know, credit must go to Louis Knutzer, because I had the misfortune of Dick Smith for standards 6, 7, and 8, and had to watch him beat up the odd student, which I'm sure you might have heard. Michael Romberg was his favorite target. And he just used to pile on the homework, and that's the way he taught. Whereas Louis Knutzer had a very different style, which worked for me, where the work volume was a lot less, but he sent you away to actually learn the stuff, and then he walked around the class and basically tested you, in which you had to, you know, so you were actually learning a lot more. And I think that style was obviously great. And he's just a great character, and a very different, you know, obviously, I mean, him coming to school in his pajamas because he woke up late was also an interesting experience, and just an incredible character on his own. Speaking about John Ince, I think that his absolute dedication towards SACS and the school, which he lived for, and that's my experience of him. I never had him as a teacher, but so I knew him basically from a macro perspective as opposed to a micro perspective. And that's basically what I'd like to share about the teachers at school. And those are the 2 that stood out for me. I think to put it in a nutshell, it's the passion for the language, yeah, and the passion for his job. I mean, he lived it. And I think that's the way I can describe it. And of course, outside the classroom, we all remember the Saints. So if you have him around, he'll give us a version of the Saints. Yeah, no, that's Louis Knutzer. I don't know. I don't know who's coming or who's not. I've been involved in moving down from Johannesburg to Cape Town. So my life for the last 3 to 4 months has been chaotic, and I've only been in Cape Town for 2 weeks. So that's why my study is chaotic. So fortunately, you can't see my study. You can only see a white wall, not what goes on around it. My son, very, very successful in the IT industry. He went overseas and Plymouth University graduated. He really wasn't too interested in school in South Africa. In fact, the matric that he got in South Africa would not have got him into a university in South Africa. However, he did private work on his own, where he got companies he didn't build them for any work. He was fixing up IT departments. He did not build them. All he asked for them, and I found this out afterwards, all he asked was for a reference at the end of the day. Someone, well, I'm not quite sure who it was, paid for him to do online courses in the States. And this was not cheap courses. It was in excess of 20,000 rand. And this is what got him into Plymouth University. He went over there and did exceptionally well. So the fact that he was not too interested in school, but the problem we had was he was doing accountancy and maths. We were hijacked when he was in Standard 9, and with a 9mm pistol to our heads. And yeah, it was actually a frightening experience where he actually passed out. And we got him off to hospital, and he came round the following day. And that's the effect that it had on him. He actually lost his memory. And if you think, if you lose your memory in Standard 9 with maths and accountancy, you are dead in the water, because to try and catch that up. And he was put through because of his marks during the year. He never recovered. So he scraped through matric, but he had this passion for IT ever since Standard 2. So he went to Plymouth University, studied IT, and has done exceptionally well for himself. He's actually a senior manager in a listed American company. And in fact, he's a major shareholder in that company because he was involved in some development, which some senior people got involved with him. If it wasn't for COVID, he'd be a billionaire today. As a result of COVID, he's got to sit with 100 million rand, $100 million plus in his bank account. So they're successful, and he's actually quite a, how shall I say, hard-assed individual, where he threatened the company he's with and the position he's got. He wasn't happy with what was happening. He threatened to leave them. They were dead scared of him doing that. In fact, he actually packed his bags, came out to South Africa a week, and then had a meeting with them, and they actually took him seriously because that's how they value him. So done exceptionally well, and I'm sure he'll do well in the future. So we'll see what happens. And he's talking about retiring at 40. I'm trying to get him to forget about ideas like that. So a person with this type of potential is such a waste. He's got another 20 or 30 years of work that he can contribute to the IT industry. What happened was my son and I had gone to the movies. We were coming home and we picked up a tail. There was probably a order out for my Merc that I was driving at that stage, C220, 1995, 96 model. So you probably find there was an order for spare parts. It's the only way I can actually think about it. We picked up a tail and didn't notice it. We just put in an electric gate, and fortunately we locked it. So when I drove up, my son got out to unlock it, and these guys came in behind me, so I couldn't get away. In fact, they put the guy had the gun out, and he actually put his finger over his mouth for my son. Keep quiet. And the next thing I knew, I had a 9mm at my head. It's very, very fortunate because my daughter was studying for matric. I think it was Standard 9 or matric, I'm not quite sure. And probably Standard 9. And she was inside the house. And what had happened was we pushed the remote to open the gate, but because of the lock, the gate would not open, and then the electrics, nothing happens. So you can't open it for a period of time. Thank God they didn't, otherwise they'd probably have got in the house and raped her in the process. So, the story goes even deeper than that. And My son, I mean, they whiplashed me a little bit around the head. I was told I was very, very angry for a period of time after that. As I said, my son passed out, went to hospital, he lost his memory. And in fact, to this day, the story that you quote, I can associate with. Because to this day, I didn't realize that my son is still traumatized about it. When he got upset with his company, he came out here. I didn't realize it, but all I did was I went out to just to go and get some money because I had to pay some for the following day. So I got some cash from the auto bank over the road. I couldn't understand why he was standing at the gate, at the door. When I came back, he wasn't very impressed with me. And we had a chat afterwards. And in fact, he's absolutely paranoid about leaving the gate open at night. I mean, this is probably 9 o'clock at night now. So I can understand the story that your son comes. And the story that he told me when he went over to study. He said in the UK, he could actually walk in the streets and he doesn't have to fear looking behind him. So it's something that's going to live with him for the rest of his life. So, and I mean, as I said, I didn't realize it, but I apparently became very aggressive. I thought I was okay, but eventually, I mean, we had visit psychologists at meetings. I thought I was okay. I always have thought I'm okay, no matter what. So yes, that's and you know, and you talk to people in South Africa, either they've been hijacked or they know someone that has been. I've had staff that have been hijacked. I've had a boss that was hijacked and moved down to Cape Town many years ago. So it's just a way of life up here.
Is it?
I don't know. I'm not coming into contact with people that are being hijacked now. In fact, I had a member of staff that was regularly hijacked, and they're people, that's obviously where they lived. I'm not coming into contact with people that often now they get hijacked. I think people are becoming more careful. I think their security is becoming greater, but crime is a lot worse. We in the area that I stayed in Johannesburg, it took us 15 years to get our suburb fenced off. We don't have booms in it, but we've got fencing and there's limited access in and out of the suburb. We had someone in the municipality that was against it, did everything they could to prevent it from happening, but eventually we got it done. As soon as the fence went up, the crime rate in the suburb dropped substantially and the crime moved over the road. So crime is endemic here, but it's people that are desperate. I mean, we've got our official unemployment rate is 36%. If you look at people that are given up looking for jobs, it's 40-odd%. And these people are hungry. And unfortunately, we have an economy that's not growing because economic policies that have been followed for 20 years is a centralist Marxist policy as opposed to a free enterprise policy. So you don't get, you know, without an economy growing, with an education system that's not great, so children are not being trained for the marketplace, and there are no jobs there for them as well. I mean, our youth unemployment rate is horrible, and unfortunately, it appears that nothing's being done. It's all smoke and mirrors or telling everybody what they're doing, but nothing is happening, unfortunately. And it's just, it's absolutely tragic. No, it's absolutely tragic. And I feel for youth. I mean, my daughter's in the process of immigrating overseas because her daughter's 3 years old, her son is a couple of months old, and they see no future for them. I think that is why a lot of people have left this country, and it's very, very sad because the brains are leaving the country, not just whites. Indian people are leaving as well, and I think you probably find that the educated black is leaving as well. I mean, the most intelligent person I have met in the last couple of years is a doctor. I had a sciatic, whatever they call the thing, nerve. I had a serious problem about 2 or 3 years ago. And the neurosurgeon, there was a black lady that could see me, and I've not seen brains like that for many, many, many years. And if some people, if things go belly up here, these are the people we're going to lose. We can't afford it. I think, you know, of a tsunami coming for a long, long time.
Yes.
You think about, I studied, you and I finished school, and we went to university, and it was very much number crunching. The age of the computer wasn't there yet. And I watched the development. I mean, when I was an article clerk, there was one company that did everything manually. Can you believe that today?
The
and
companies
in
still
accountancy,
do it.
I've obviously watched. Well, not with me, they don't. But I've actually watched development over time of sizes of finance departments. I ran a very, very successful finance department. One of the companies was an exceptionally successful finance department where I used a very, very good bookkeeper as the financial manager. I had a clerk working with her who gave information through to me. And that was it. And the information came to me, and eventually I put systems in place where I was bored. Wow. Because, as you say, I looked at, does it make sense? And eventually she put it together so well because the system was there. I mean, we threw out an ERP system which cost an absolute fortune in dollars. We put in a South African-based package which cost 50 or 60,000 Rand a year in license fees. And the system that we put in, I mean, the ERP system was obsolete, old. It was very ham-handed. We put in a very, very focused system which worked incredibly well. And basically, I won't say did me out of a job because someone always had to do the thinking at the end of the day. But this specific company, fortunately, there was another company as well which kept me on my toes. And obviously, I had both sales administration and HR underneath me running both companies. Right. But eventually, I mean, when I left, I told my boss 3 years ago, that if something happened to me, I've trained my staff in such a way to put a good financial accountant, financial person in my chair, my staff will train him because he'll have the macro knowledge and will feed him. And it's exactly what's happened. I mean, my boss, when I told him I wanted to retire at the end of September, he wet his pants. He wasn't very happy. And I was eventually going to work for him from Cape Town. But it made sense to get a high-powered person in place. Exactly what I told him. I mean, I agreed that I would stick around for an extra 3 months. Instead of leaving end of September, in fact, end of October, I left the end of January. So October, November, December, January is when I left. I basically handed over to the guy he started the 1st of November. Handed over to him on the 1st of December. I went upstairs and was just available to assist. There's no problem. He's on a year end now, no problem. Everything's there. He phones me and says, well, what did you do here? I said, well, I got the IT consultant to actually do the year end because if something went wrong, he would put it right. And I wasn't prepared to do the year end rollovers. I could have, but I'd rather hand it over. And it's that type of information I'm sharing with you. There's another issue that the computer I'm on, the laptop I'm on, I've got my personal computer, and this is the company's laptop that I'm talking to you on. And my boss basically instructed me to keep the laptop when I told him I'd leave it on his desk. And fortunately, it's happened because there's stuff with our Reserve Bank and the company in America that only I have the knowledge, the background. So I'm still assisting. It's that level of knowledge. And it's not a case of being busy 8 hours a day. It's a case of being busy 2 or 3 hours a day. And relying on the people around you. So exactly what you've said. Now, as you say, the bookkeeper will never be without a job because she is actually doing the bookkeeping, the accounting, and getting the information up to the top. The person at the top will always have a job because of the strategy, what is actually going on, and obviously the checking or making sure it's happening. I mean, in accountancy now, you put a trial balance into a program and out comes audited accounts or accounts for auditing. Then, of course, you've got to read the notes. You've got to make sure that it actually makes sense. So, so what we used to do, and I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I used to draft the accounts myself on on Excel. I used to hand it over to the auditors. They then typed it into their thing. That doesn't happen anymore. You push a button, you've got an income statement out. You push a button, you've got a balance sheet out. The one thing that you won't push a button, well, maybe we're going that way. The strength that I've always brought to a company is their cash flow. I've said, I don't care what your financials say. I said, where's your money? Where the gremlins into the future? Where the icebergs? Tell us in advance where those icebergs
100%.
are. Don't let's hit the iceberg and then have a plan.
Absolutely.
And
That's exactly
the
the
value
point.
at the top.